Hi there, problem solvers. Welcome to this exposition. What we're going to do basically today is to combine our front end and our back end on one server instance. This isn't considered best practice. However, there are situations where this could be handy in conditions like a server where there could be like a limited amount of apps that could run. You could just use one server to host your front end and your back end. So without further ado, let's get started. So what I've done here is simply create two terminal tabs, one for my front end and one for my back end. In this case, what we'll be using for this exposition for our back end is Express.js and our front end is going to be React. And possibly you could set up a database as the case may be. If you look here at our folder directory, we have our front end which is built with React and our back end which is built with Express. So we're going to start quickly with our front end. We have our app.txt file. I'm just going to minimize our terminals. App.txt file, the landing page points to page 1 and the other route points to a specific part which is dynamic, and this happens to go to page 2. So our page 1 is just the default. So our page 1 is just the default Vite landing page that comes with the installation. We just did some few changes and we'll get to that in a moment. However, we are making our API calls to our backend. This shouldn't be like a specific or a precise use case for you. It's just to show that we can actually access our APIs from our front end. And if you check our page 2, you can also see this here as well, where we are routing to our APIs and we are able to get certain requests on this landing page. Alright, to get our app started, what we are going to do now is simply run npm run dev, and that will connect to our React front end. So let's quickly jump into our back end as we explain some of the functionalities that was written there. For our back end, what we simply have is the endpoint that we are hitting on our front end, which we can see that now params takes in a dynamic ID, and which we have the structured here, and we are sending that back to our API. Basically, we have to install queries to enable us send data directly to our front end, and also get data from our front end as well. So we have that installed. So to get this backend up and running, all we just need to do is cd into the directory and do npm run dev as well, and this will start up our backend. Basically, you can see here our server is alive on the specific port which is running. Okay, with that out of the way, all we just need to do is head to our front end and put in our address and simply reload it. But we need to do some housekeeping rules to be able to tell our API that, hey, whenever we are going to a specific route, head to the API for the backend. Well, once the prefix for our endpoint or path does not have a specific keyword, then we need to go to our React. So basically what we are doing here is creating a middleware that will simply tell Express that once the URL path has a specific prefix, all we want it to do is actually go to this place. If it doesn't have, come this way. So in this case, what we are setting here is if the URL path prefix has an API added to it, which is this guy here, what we are doing is we want you to hit to the next function on the stack, and that is what we're doing here. However, if we don't have that API, what we are doing now is that we are heading directly to this directory where our app will actually reside, precisely our build for our front end, and you will see that that will make a lot of sense as we progress. The next thing we need to do is also set it up in a way that Express will see whatever is in the Dix directory as a static file, so that it can be able to handle that. This is a housekeeping rule for Express.js because it needs a specific pattern to be able to handle static files, and we also need to put the / here because that's a directory. Now with that out of the way, what we need to do now is simulate how the application will be built. I would advise that you set in your ts.config file your output directory to go to the build, and also for all of your TypeScript files for your backend, I will also recommend you store it in a source folder like this, and that source folder should hold all of the server files, TypeScript files that you'll be needing for your project, and you need to specify it here inside of the root directory like that. So just simply click refresh. You can clearly see here that our math random value was sent from our front end and it was returned back from our backend. So if I also go to the / specific path, you can clearly see that that shaked a bit, and that was sent from the front end to the back end, and that was available here. So the order of sequence for us to get our server to discover that all the files are booted from one directory will have to be inside of a bash script like this. So I just created my, and I call this roll up. So all you need to do now is click this and name the file roll up.exe. You can name it whatever you want. In this case, I'll just leave it like that. You can call it server deployment, and that script file will be the one that will be handled by our server, precisely render when we are going to deploy. So the first thing you need to do is actually cd into the back end. Once you cd into the back end, you have to install all of the dependencies by making use of npm I. Then once that is done, the next thing you need to do now is to compile all of the ts files to javascript files. After that, you come out of that backend folder, and once I think once that's done, that will create a build folder just as we specified right here inside of our output directory. That will create a build folder, and you have to now build the front end. You cd into it like so, then you have to run the npm install, because there will be no node modules, or sometimes probably there might be updated node modules that you need to update, so you need to reinstall that. Then the next thing you need to do is run an npm build like this, so that it will be able to build the front end. The next part is really crucial. All you need to do is to move what is in this directory all the way to the backend folder, and inside the backend folder you have to move it inside of the compiled ts file, which is called build, and that is the end of the sequence. So to actually get this running on Linux, you just need to do bourne again shell, and you precisely do roll up like so. So if you are not using a Linux operating system, there's no problem, but however the servers are Linux based, and this is highly recommended. So you can see here that the build file has been ejected. It just has the index.txt, and now it is actually building the front end, and now you can see this directory right here in the front end. Housekeeping rules: I will always recommend that you set that build folder to gitignore, so that we don't push that to the server, because that will cause issues when it's trying to override folders. However, I also set my node models as well, and my environment variables for my front end. So here I set my environment variables, precisely the REST API, fit_REST API, to be my API for my back end, and this is very handy once it comes to deployment. So once that's done, the next thing you need to do is actually commit all of these changes and push them to GitHub. For our deployment service, what we're making use of is render. To actually create a server, all you need to do is click the new button up there and select web server. Then once you're done, you need to search for the particular repo that you want to use. Once you select that, the next thing you need to do is give it a name. In this case, I called my Monolith Crush 2, since I already have the version 1, which was made with vanilla JavaScript. And then the next thing I proceeded to do was to select the particular runtime, which in this case was Node. And then after I did the select, I had to tell it to run the roll-up script, which was actually configured on our code base. The next thing we need to do is tell it that it needs to build on the Node backend, this folder. I set it up like so. Then the next thing I needed to do was add my environment variables. First and most importantly, the Node version. you need to actually set up the node version you used in development so that you will not have issues. Then I had to set up our Vite URL backend, which is precisely the backend that we are using for our app. And lo and behold, the server was live. I tested it like it's supposed to, and everything worked perfectly fine. If you like this video, please do hit the like button and subscribe for more.